Royal Guard SDARES in horror, after Princess Charlotte showed him the wounds on her back. The grand halls of the royal residence always looked perfect, bathed in warm golden light that reflected off ornate chandeliers. For anyone visiting, it was a picture of elegance and peace. But inside, behind the carefully arranged decor and polite smiles, there were layers of tension and secrets that no visitor could ever guess. Princess Charlotte walked through the corridors with the grace and composure expected of someone born into royalty. She had the perfect posture, her head held high, her movements measured and smooth. Her public appearance was flawless. Everyone in the palace, from the highest-ranking officials to the newest staff members, admired her. They saw only the serene, kind, and charming young princess, the symbol of the family's dignity and history. But not everyone could see past the perfection. Some could sense the faint shadow of something hidden beneath her composed exterior. Among those who sensed it was Thomas, one of the royal guards. Thomas had served the royal family for years. He had seen generations of royals grow up. He had stood silently in every major ceremony, and he had been trained to notice small details, to stay alert for any sign of danger. Discipline and loyalty were his guiding principles, and he took his duty seriously. Yet in recent days, he had noticed subtle changes in Princess Charlotte's behavior that worried him deeply. It had started with small things. She flinched when someone lightly touched her shoulder in passing. Her hands sometimes trembled when she lifted them to greet visitors. There were nights when she lingered alone in her chambers, staring out at the moonlight filtering through the windows, her expression unreadable. Thomas had initially dismissed these observations as the result of fatigue or stress. After all, the life of a royal was filled with constant scrutiny, endless events, and rigid expectations. Perhaps it was normal for someone in her position to show signs of strain, but the unease in his chest grew stronger each day. It wasn't just her subtle physical reactions. It was the sadness that seemed to cloud her eyes sometimes, even when she forced a smile. He had never seen her this way before, and his instincts as a guard told him that something was wrong. A guard's duty was not only to protect a royal from external threats, but also to be vigilant about their well-being. And Thomas had begun to fear that the danger Charlotte faced might not be from the outside world, but from within the palace walls themselves, or perhaps from memories she carried with her. One quiet evening, after a formal reception that had gone smoothly but left Charlotte unusually quiet, Thomas was instructed to accompany her back to her private chambers. The corridors were almost empty, the servants having retreated after completing their evening tasks. The dim glow of lanterns cast long shadows along the polished floors, and the only sounds were their own footsteps and the faint ticking of an ornate wall clock. Thomas walked a respectful distance behind Charlotte, as always, attentive but careful not to intrude. Charlotte paused briefly in front of a tall, gilded mirror. She seemed to hesitate, her hands gripping the edges of the marble console table in front of her. Her reflection showed a poised young woman, perfectly composed, yet Thomas noticed the tension in her shoulders, the slight downward tilt of her eyes. For a moment, the silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Then she turned to Thomas and said softly, "Thomas, could you stay with me for a moment? I need someone I can trust." Thomas felt a flicker of concern. The princess had never spoken to him like this before, not privately, not in a way that suggested real vulnerability. He nodded quietly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle even more heavily on his shoulders. "Of course, Your Highness," he replied. His voice was steady, but inside he felt a mix of curiosity and worry. What could have happened to make her seek him out in such a manner? Charlotte led him into a smaller chamber off the main hallway. The room was cozy compared to the vast halls of the palace, with soft carpets, warm lighting, and delicate curtains that framed the tall windows. It was the kind of space where one could speak freely without the constant eyes of attendants or officials. Charlotte closed the door gently behind them and faced Thomas with an expression that made him pause. There was a vulnerability there, a fragile honesty that he had never seen before in the princess. I have something to show you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas noticed the hesitation in her tone, the way her fingers twisted together as she tried to steady herself. "It's not something I've shown anyone before," she added. Her eyes met his, searching for reassurance, for the silent promise that he would not judge or betray her trust. Thomas swallowed hard, realizing that this moment required more than just his usual composure. It required empathy, patience, and understanding. Charlotte carefully lifted the folds of her dress at the back, revealing a series of scars and marks that ran across her skin. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. The sight was shocking, but more than the physical injuries, it was the story they told. These were not fresh wounds. They were the remnants of pain endured silently over a long period. Each mark seemed to carry with it a memory, a moment of fear, and a struggle that Charlotte had faced alone. Thomas instinctively stepped closer, though he maintained the proper distance, as if proximity could somehow offer protection without overstepping boundaries. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of shared understanding, the kind that arises when one person finally allows another to see a side of them that has always been hidden. Thomas's mind raced with questions, but he knew that now was not the time to interrogate. His role was to listen, to offer support, and to acknowledge the courage it took for Charlotte to reveal such a private and painful part of herself. Finally, she spoke again, her voice trembling slightly. These are my scars," she said. "I've carried them for years. I've tried to hide them from everyone to keep up the appearance of being strong, of being okay. But it's been hard. Sometimes it feels like no one would understand, and that if I spoke up, it would make things worse." Her words were quiet, yet they carried the weight of someone who had endured far more than anyone could imagine. Thomas felt a knot in his chest. His disciplined training had never prepared him for moments like this, when the danger was not an external threat but a human soul in pain. He wanted to say something to reassure her, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he simply nodded, allowing the silence to communicate what words could not, that he believed her, that he was there for her, and that she was not alone anymore. Over the next few minutes, Charlotte shared more of her story. She spoke of the pressures of palace life, the impossible expectations, and the moments when fear and sadness had become overwhelming. She did not go into every detail, but the fragments she revealed were enough to show the depth of her struggle. Thomas listened intently, feeling both admiration for her strength and a deep sorrow for the suffering she had endured in silence. He realized that the role of a royal guard was not only to protect the princess from physical threats, but also to safeguard her well-being in a broader sense, to be a steady presence in the face of the invisible challenges she faced every day. As the evening wore on, Thomas's concern transformed into a quiet resolve. He would not let Charlotte face this alone. He would find ways, discreetly and respectfully, to support her, to ensure her safety, and to help her find the help she needed. The palace, for all its grandeur and beauty, could be a lonely and isolating place, but Thomas understood that his presence, his loyalty, and his empathy could make a real difference. When he finally left her chambers that night, Thomas felt a mixture of emotions. Shock, concern, and a heavy sense of responsibility weighed on him, but so did a deep respect and admiration for Princess Charlotte. She had trusted him with her pain, something no one else in the palace had been allowed to see. That trust was a bond that he would honor with every action, every moment he spent guarding her. The corridor outside seemed colder and emptier than before, but Thomas knew that the most important battles were not fought in public halls or on ceremonial grounds. They were fought quietly, in moments of courage, trust, and human connection. And as he walked through the long, echoing halls of the palace that night, he understood that the days ahead would not be easy. The path to helping Charlotte heal and protecting her from further harm would be filled with delicate challenges, careful decisions, and quiet vigilance. But for the first time, Thomas also felt a spark of hope. In the quiet bravery of Princess Charlotte, he saw a strength that could endure and overcome, a light that refused to be extinguished despite the darkness she had faced. And he knew, with a certainty that steadied his heart, that he would do everything in his power to help her find peace, safety, and perhaps, in time, the happiness she truly deserved. After that evening, a quiet tension settled over the palace for both Princess Charlotte and Thomas. The revelation of her scars had changed something between them. Thomas could no longer view his duty as only watching over her in public spaces or guarding her from obvious threats. Now he was aware of a hidden pain that no one else saw, a burden Charlotte had carried silently for years. Every step he took in her presence reminded him of that moment when she had shown him the truth, and it filled him with a sense of responsibility far heavier than his usual guard duties. Charlotte, for her part, felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Relief because she had finally shared part of her hidden suffering with someone she trusted. Anxiety because she wondered how Thomas might react in the days to come. Would he treat her differently? Would he be able to protect her from the subtle pressures of palace life that she could never escape? For years, she had hidden behind a mask of composure, but now, she felt a vulnerability that was both frightening and liberating. In the following days, Thomas noticed subtle signs that confirmed Charlotte's fragility. During public appearances, she sometimes hesitated when a royal aide or court official approached her, or she flinched at gestures that might seem harmless to others. Once, during a formal dinner, someone accidentally brushed against her shoulder while passing, and she recoiled slightly. Thomas was quick to step forward with a polite excuse, diverting attention and ensuring her comfort without drawing notice from the rest of the room. These small acts were his way of silently affirming his promise to her, the promise that he would protect her not just from threats in the open, but from the subtle discomforts and hidden dangers that came from living under constant scrutiny. Thomas had always believed in strict professionalism, but now he understood that sometimes true protection required compassion, observation, and understanding beyond what protocol demanded. One afternoon, Charlotte asked Thomas to accompany her on a walk through the palace gardens. The gardens were a place of relative calm, far from the watchful eyes of the court. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting gentle patterns on the gravel paths, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Here, the princess could move more freely, away from the formalities that constrained her in the halls. As they walked side by side, Charlotte spoke in quiet tones. "Thomas, it is strange," she said, "to feel safe with someone. I have always had guards around me, yet none ever felt present." "You are different." Thomas looked at her carefully, understanding that the weight of this compliment was heavier than it appeared. It was a recognition of trust, an acknowledgement that he had earned a place not only as her protector, but as someone who could be there for her in moments of true vulnerability. Charlotte continued, "These wounds, they are not just physical. They are reminders of times when I felt powerless, when I could not speak or act for myself. I have hidden them from everyone, even my closest advisors. And yet, here you are, standing by me not just as a guard, but as someone who sees me." Thomas felt a deep ache in his chest. He wanted to say more than a polite reply, more than the usual formalities, but he knew words could only go so far. Instead, he nodded and offered a reassuring presence, silently conveying that he understood, that he would not let her face this alone. The bond between them deepened in subtle ways. Thomas began noticing small details that others might overlook. The slight tension in her shoulders when she entered a room, the way she avoided looking at her reflection in polished surfaces, and the quiet sighs that escaped her when she thought no one was watching. In response, he adjusted his behavior accordingly. He would ensure her chair was positioned away from crowded spaces. He would subtly block intrusive glances from staff, and he would quietly remove any obstacles that might cause her discomfort. Charlotte, in turn, began opening up more about her feelings and experiences. Not everything, of course. Some memories were too painful to share, too private to voice aloud. But she allowed Thomas glimpses into the reality of her life, the pressures of being constantly observed, and the weight of expectations that often felt unbearable. In these moments, the walls she had built around herself began to crack, and Thomas became the silent witness to her courage. One evening, as the palace was quiet and most staff had retired for the night, Charlotte invited Thomas to sit with her in the library. The room was dimly lit, filled with the scent of old books and polished wood. She spoke of the fear she had carried, the loneliness of feeling trapped in a world that demanded perfection at all times, and the moments when she had questioned whether anyone could truly understand her struggles. Thomas listened without interruption, his presence alone providing a sense of stability and safety. He did not offer solutions or platitudes. He simply allowed her to speak, acknowledging her pain with his attention and understanding. It was during these quiet hours that Charlotte realized the importance of having someone who could see beyond the outward appearance, someone who could honor her experiences without judgment or expectation. Over time, their interactions became more routine yet meaningful. Thomas found ways to protect Charlotte in ways that were invisible to others. He would discreetly move threatening objects or situations out of her way, ensure that she had private moments during busy events, and occasionally provide a quiet word of reassurance when she appeared tense or anxious. Each action, though small, was a reaffirmation of the trust she had placed in him. Charlotte's confidence grew, albeit slowly. The mere presence of someone who truly understood and supported her allowed her to navigate palace life with slightly less fear. She began to smile more genuinely, to laugh quietly during moments of reprieve, and to reclaim small freedoms that had seemed impossible before. And though the scars on her back were still a source of pain, both physical and emotional, she no longer carried them entirely alone. One afternoon, while reviewing plans for an upcoming royal event, Charlotte paused and looked at Thomas. "I never thought I could feel safe like this," she admitted, her voice quiet but steady. "Even though these halls are filled with people and the palace is always watching, with you here it feels lighter, less frightening." Thomas met her gaze, silently acknowledging her words. There was no need for elaborate speeches or promises. The bond they shared was evident in every glance, every small act of consideration. Despite this growing closeness, Thomas remained cautious. He knew that his role was delicate. The palace was a place of strict hierarchy where appearances mattered above all else. Any hint of impropriety or favoritism could be misconstrued, and the delicate balance of trust and duty could be disrupted. He carefully navigated these boundaries, ensuring that Charlotte's well-being remained his priority without drawing unnecessary attention. Their growing trust, however, did not go unnoticed entirely. A few of the palace staff began to remark on the attentive nature of Thomas, noting how he seemed to anticipate the princess's needs before she even spoke. Some viewed it as exceptional dedication, while others wondered quietly about the unusual closeness. Yet, Thomas remained steady, guided by a moral compass that placed Charlotte's safety and comfort above all else. The emotional weight of the situation was not lost on either of them. Charlotte often reflected on how different her life might have been had she not found someone like Thomas to confide in. She had spent years hiding behind a mask, fearing judgment, ridicule, or misunderstanding. Now, for the first time in a long while, she felt that someone truly saw her, understood her pain, and respected her strength. Thomas, on the other hand, carried his own quiet reflections. He had always believed that being a royal guard was about vigilance and duty, but he now understood that true protection went beyond physical security. It was about emotional awareness, empathy, and being present in moments that others might overlook. The responsibility was heavy, but the reward was profound. The trust of someone courageous, someone who had endured unimaginable pain, and who had allowed him to stand by her side. One rainy evening, as the sound of raindrops pattered gently against the tall windows of Charlotte's chambers, Thomas found himself reflecting on the journey they had begun together. The storm outside mirrored the turbulence of emotions inside the palace, yet within the quiet safety of the room, there was a sense of calm, of understanding, and of hope. Charlotte sat near the window, her gaze distant but serene, while Thomas stood nearby, ready to act if needed, yet content simply to be there. In that shared silence, they both understood a fundamental truth: trust, once earned, could be more powerful than fear. The palace, with all its grandeur and hidden dangers, could not break the bond they had begun to form. Charlotte's courage to reveal her vulnerability, and Thomas's commitment to honor and protect her, created a quiet fortress against the unseen pressures of their world. As the night deepened, Charlotte finally spoke again. "Thank you, Thomas," she said softly, "for seeing me, for being here, and for making me feel safe." Thomas nodded, a quiet smile touching his lips. He could not promise to erase the past, nor could he guarantee the absence of future challenges, but he could promise to remain steadfast, vigilant, and present. And in that promise, both found a measure of peace. Their journey was only beginning. The scars Charlotte bore were a reminder of the struggles she had endured, but they were also a symbol of resilience. And Thomas, as her protector and confidant, understood that his role was no longer just a matter of duty. It was a matter of trust, empathy, and quiet courage. Together, they would face the days ahead, finding strength in each other's presence, and slowly, carefully, moving toward healing and hope. Life in the palace continued its usual rhythm, with formal events, meetings, and ceremonies filling the days. Yet beneath the grand walls and shining chandeliers, a quiet transformation was taking place. Princess Charlotte, though still burdened by the memories of her past and the physical marks that remained, was beginning to find a sense of strength and agency she had never known before. And at the center of this slow transformation was Thomas, her royal guard, who had become more than just a protector. He was her confidant, her silent supporter, and a steady presence in her life. Thomas noticed changes in Charlotte gradually. She moved with slightly more ease through the palace corridors, her shoulders less tense, her steps less hesitant. She laughed more, though quietly, in moments that were not part of public ceremonies. She spoke with a little more confidence during her meetings with advisors, though her humility and grace remained intact. These small signs of improvement were deeply encouraging to Thomas, who had worried so much about her well-being in the weeks since she had first revealed her scars. Despite these changes, the palace was still a place of tension and scrutiny. Court officials watched the princess closely, and even minor mistakes could be magnified in whispers behind closed doors. Thomas remained vigilant, not only against overt threats, but also against the subtle pressures that could undermine Charlotte's sense of safety and confidence. He learned to anticipate her needs before she even spoke, arranging rooms to be more comfortable, guiding her through crowds with careful attention, and removing potential sources of stress whenever he could. One afternoon, Charlotte requested a quiet meeting in the private garden behind the palace. The garden was her sanctuary, a place where she could breathe freely and let the weight of her responsibilities ease for a while. Thomas accompanied her, walking slightly behind and to the side, keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings while remaining unobtrusive. The sun shone warmly through the branches of ancient trees, casting playful shadows on the gravel paths, and the scent of blooming flowers filled the air. It was a rare moment of calm in a world that rarely allowed it. Charlotte stopped near a small fountain, watching the water ripple and sparkle in the sunlight. She turned to Thomas, her voice quiet but steady. "Thomas, I feel different today, not completely free but lighter. I don't think I would have felt this way if you weren't here." I might have continued to hide, pretending that everything was fine, even though I was. Thomas nodded, understanding the depth of her words. He did not speak immediately, knowing that sometimes presence was more important than speech. After a few moments, he replied softly, "You don't have to pretend anymore, Your Highness. You've already shown great courage. I'll continue to be here for you quietly, without judgment and without drawing attention to what you're feeling. That's my promise." Charlotte smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and gratitude in her eyes. For years, she had been forced to wear a mask of perfection, hiding fear and pain from everyone around her. But in this small, quiet corner of the world, she felt seen, and that gave her a small but meaningful sense of freedom. Over the following weeks, their routine became a quiet rhythm. Thomas was attentive to Charlotte's needs without being intrusive, and she gradually learned to rely on his presence without feeling embarrassed or exposed. In moments of stress, she would seek him out, whether to walk through the gardens, review her schedule, or simply sit in silence. These interactions, though unremarkable to outsiders, were significant steps in Charlotte's journey toward emotional recovery. One evening, after a particularly long day filled with meetings and formal appearances, Charlotte returned to her chambers visibly exhausted. Thomas was already nearby, as he usually was, ensuring that her space was comfortable and that she had everything she needed. He noticed her hesitancy as she removed her gloves and jacket, the small winces that hinted at lingering discomfort. "Would you like me to bring some tea?" Thomas asked gently. Charlotte nodded, grateful for the simple kindness. "Yes, please," she replied. Her voice was tired, but there was a hint of warmth in it, a signal that she trusted him and felt safe enough to accept assistance. While preparing the tea, Thomas thought about how far Charlotte had come. The princess had endured much, yet she was finding ways to reclaim her sense of self. He felt a deep sense of admiration for her courage, and also a quiet determination to continue supporting her. This was not a temporary role or a simple duty. It had become a meaningful part of his life. As the days passed, Charlotte began to engage in activities that had once seemed impossible. She requested small meetings with palace staff to review schedules and discuss upcoming events, asserting her opinions with a newfound confidence. She started spending more time in the gardens, walking without hesitation, and enjoying the fresh air without fear of judgment. She even began reading books she had once set aside, finding solace in stories that allowed her mind to wander away from the pressures of royal life. Thomas observed these changes with careful attention. He knew that healing was not a straight path. There would be days of doubt and fatigue, moments when Charlotte would retreat inward or feel overwhelmed. On such days, he was patient, offering quiet encouragement and unobtrusive support. He understood that his role was not to fix her, but to be a reliable presence, to help her navigate her world with dignity and safety. One rainy afternoon, a small but significant incident occurred. Charlotte had been scheduled to attend a public event, and she felt nervous about the crowds and attention. As they walked toward the entrance, Thomas noticed her grip tighten on the edge of her cloak, a subtle sign of rising anxiety. He gently placed a hand near her elbow, offering silent reassurance. "You're not alone," he said quietly. "I'm here." Charlotte took a deep breath, feeling the strength of his presence. The simple acknowledgement of her fear, without judgment or unnecessary words, allowed her to regain composure. She stepped forward with renewed confidence, walking through the crowd with Thomas at her side, his vigilance unobtrusive but unwavering. The event passed smoothly, and Charlotte felt a small but meaningful victory. She had faced her fear, supported by someone she trusted completely. In addition to public appearances, Thomas also supported Charlotte in more private ways. He ensured that her living quarters were safe and comfortable, that her schedule allowed for rest, and that she had moments of solitude when she needed them. He accompanied her during walks in the gardens or along quiet corridors, ready to intervene if necessary but careful to allow her autonomy. Over time, these small acts of care strengthened the bond between them, creating a quiet partnership built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. Charlotte began to open up more about her past, sharing memories of times when she had felt powerless or afraid. She spoke of the long hours spent hiding her pain, the moments when she had doubted her own strength, and the fears that had once controlled her life. Thomas listened without interruption, offering only his attention and understanding. The act of sharing these memories, even partially, was a profound step in Charlotte's journey toward healing. One evening, as the sun set and painted the palace in shades of gold and pink, Charlotte sat with Thomas in the quiet garden. "I never thought I could feel this much peace," she admitted. "Even in these halls, even with so many people watching, I feel calmer knowing that you are here. I feel like I can take small steps forward one day at a time." Thomas nodded, his expression calm and supportive. "You've already taken many steps, Your Highness, and I will continue to be here helping you whenever you need it. You are stronger than you know, and I am honored to witness it." The bond between them continued to grow, built on shared understanding and quiet trust. Charlotte's physical scars were a constant reminder of her past struggles, but they no longer defined her entirely. With Thomas's support, she was learning to navigate her world with confidence, to reclaim moments of joy and freedom that had once seemed out of reach. Their journey was not without challenges. There were moments of doubt, days when Charlotte felt overwhelmed or tired, and instances when the pressures of palace life threatened to overshadow her progress. Yet through it all, Thomas remained a steadfast presence, attentive, patient, and respectful of her boundaries. The quiet acts of protection and empathy he offered became the foundation for Charlotte's gradual healing, allowing her to rebuild her sense of self and reclaim control over her life. In the weeks that followed, Charlotte's transformation became more visible to others, though it remained subtle. She walked with slightly more confidence, engaged in conversations with more ease, and allowed herself moments of quiet joy. Thomas continued to support her behind the scenes, ensuring that her progress was protected from the pressures of court and the expectations of the palace. As the season changed and the palace gardens bloomed with new life, Charlotte realized that she was no longer the same person who had revealed her scars to Thomas months earlier. She had faced fear, pain, and uncertainty, yet she had emerged with a sense of strength and resilience that was undeniable. And though the path ahead remained uncertain, she knew that with Thomas by her side, she could face whatever challenges awaited her. In the quiet moments they shared, whether walking through the gardens, sitting in the library, or navigating the palace corridors, a silent understanding had grown between them. Charlotte's courage and vulnerability, combined with Thomas's unwavering presence and care, created a bond that transcended the formal roles of princess and guard. It was a bond built on trust, empathy, and the shared commitment to face the world together, one small step at a time. And so the days continued, each one bringing new challenges, quiet victories, and moments of connection. Charlotte, once burdened by fear and isolation, was learning to embrace life with cautious optimism. Thomas, once focused solely on duty, had discovered the profound impact of empathy and presence. Together, they moved forward, not as princess and guard alone, but as two individuals bound by trust, respect, and the shared journey of healing. Time had passed since Princess Charlotte had first confided in Thomas about the scars she carried, both visible and hidden. The palace continued its routines, with ceremonies, visitors, and endless responsibilities that came with royal life. Yet, behind the grand walls and perfectly polished floors, a quiet transformation had taken place. Charlotte had grown stronger, more confident, and more self-aware. Her steps were steadier, her voice firmer, and her presence commanded attention without fear. The path to this growth had been slow and careful, filled with moments of doubt, quiet victories, and the unwavering support of Thomas, her royal guard. Thomas remained a constant presence in her life, attentive to her needs and protective without ever being intrusive. He had become her confidant, someone she could rely on not just for security but for understanding. Their bond had grown silently over months, rooted in trust and shared experiences, and it had become a source of strength for both of them. While Charlotte's past had been filled with pain and fear, the future now held the possibility of hope and healing. One morning, Charlotte decided to take a longer walk through the palace gardens, a place that had become her sanctuary. The early sunlight filtered through the trees, casting gentle patterns on the gravel paths. Birds sang quietly, and the air was filled with the soft fragrance of blooming flowers. Thomas walked beside her, vigilant but relaxed, allowing her to lead the way. "I never thought I could feel like this," Charlotte said quietly, breaking the peaceful silence. "Walking freely, enjoying a moment without worry, it feels almost impossible sometimes, even now." Thomas glanced at her, his expression calm and supportive. "You've earned these moments, Your Highness. You've worked hard to reclaim them. I'm glad to be here witnessing your strength." Charlotte smiled faintly. "Strength, sometimes I forget that I have it. For so long I only felt weak, trapped by expectations, by fear. But now I feel more like myself again." The walk continued in silence, comfortable and reassuring. Thomas understood that these moments were important not for words, but for presence. Simply walking beside her, allowing her to feel safe and unjudged, was a reminder that she was no longer alone. Over time, these small interactions had become the foundation of Charlotte's healing, helping her regain confidence in her own abilities and judgment. As the days went by, Charlotte began to take more control over her daily routines. She reviewed plans for upcoming events, made decisions about her schedule, and even requested meetings with staff she had once avoided. Her voice carried more authority, and her suggestions were thoughtful and considered. She still had moments of doubt, but she was learning to trust herself again, to recognize her own instincts, and to acknowledge her worth. Thomas observed these changes with quiet pride. He had seen her at her most vulnerable and witnessed the courage it took to confront her fears and past experiences. Every small victory, from standing confidently in a room full of advisors to speaking openly about her preferences, was a testament to her resilience. And while the palace remained a place of scrutiny, Thomas ensured that Charlotte had the support she needed to navigate it safely and with dignity. One afternoon, Charlotte requested that Thomas accompany her to the palace library, a place she had grown to cherish for its quiet atmosphere and sense of refuge. Rows of books lined the walls, their spines worn from years of use, and the scent of old paper filled the air. She selected a comfortable armchair by a tall window where sunlight streamed in and motioned for Thomas to sit nearby. "I want to start reading again," she said softly. "Books used to be my escape when the world felt too heavy. I think I need that again." Thomas nodded. "That is a good idea, Your Highness. It will allow your mind to rest and explore without pressure. I will stay close if you need anything, but otherwise I will remain quietly nearby." As Charlotte immersed herself in her book, Thomas noticed a sense of peace settle over her. The lines on her face, once etched with tension and worry, softened. Her posture relaxed, and her breathing became steady. These small moments of normalcy, free from expectation or judgment, were essential for her continued healing. Over time, Charlotte also began to engage in new activities that challenged her in positive ways. She participated in strategic discussions about palace affairs, contributed ideas for upcoming events, and even suggested improvements to staff routines. These actions demonstrated a growing confidence and assertiveness, as well as a willingness to reclaim control over aspects of her life that had previously felt dictated by fear or obligation. Thomas remained vigilant, guiding her subtly when necessary, but allowing her the space to make decisions and learn from experience. He understood that true protection did not mean shielding her from every challenge, but rather supporting her as she faced them with courage and wisdom. This approach helped Charlotte develop both resilience and independence, essential qualities for someone of her position. One evening, after a long day filled with meetings and preparations, Charlotte and Thomas returned to her private chambers. The sun had set, casting warm hues across the room, and the palace was quiet. Charlotte moved with a sense of calm and purpose, a stark contrast to the hesitation and fear that had once defined her every step. "I feel stronger today," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Not just in body, but in mind. I know I still have a long way to go, but I feel like I am finally starting to reclaim my life." Thomas looked at her with respect and admiration. "You have come far, Your Highness. Every step you take, no matter how small, is progress. And I will continue to be here, supporting you in every way I can." Charlotte smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "Thank you, Thomas, for everything. You have not just protected me physically, but you have helped me find myself again." As the days turned into weeks, Charlotte's confidence continued to grow. She spoke more openly in meetings, walked with ease through the palace corridors, and allowed herself moments of joy without guilt or fear. Thomas remained a quiet yet steady presence, offering reassurance and guidance when needed, but always respecting her autonomy and choices. The palace staff began to notice the change as well. Charlotte's composure, once delicate and cautious, had strengthened. She interacted with them with warmth and respect, yet with a newfound confidence that commanded attention. Her presence inspired those around her, not through authority alone, but through the quiet demonstration of courage, resilience, and integrity. One day, while walking through the gardens, Charlotte paused to watch the sunlight dance on the water in the small fountain. "Thomas," she said softly, "I think I am ready to start helping others who may be struggling. I have learned so much about myself. Maybe I can use what I've learned to make a difference." Thomas nodded, a sense of quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "That is a noble thought, Your Highness. You have faced great challenges and emerged stronger. Sharing your experience could inspire and support others who are in need." Charlotte smiled, feeling a sense of purpose that she had not known before. The palace, once a place that had felt isolating and overwhelming, was now a place where she could not only grow personally, but also contribute meaningfully to the lives of others. Her journey of healing had transformed her perspective, allowing her to see strength not just in herself, but in the potential to make a difference for those around her. As the months continued, Charlotte took on more responsibilities, balancing her royal duties with moments of personal growth and reflection. She developed routines that allowed her to maintain her physical and emotional well-being, and she sought quiet moments to engage in reading, reflection, and walks through the gardens. Thomas remained a consistent presence, offering support and guidance while allowing her the freedom to take ownership of her life. Through all these experiences, the bond between Charlotte and Thomas remained strong. Their relationship was one of mutual respect, trust, and understanding. Charlotte's courage and openness had allowed Thomas to see the depth of her character, while Thomas's unwavering support had given Charlotte the confidence to reclaim her strength. Together, they navigated the complexities of palace life, each step reinforcing their trust and reliance on one another. By the time the next formal events approached, Charlotte was noticeably different from the young princess who had first revealed her scars. She walked with confidence, spoke with authority, and engaged with others without hesitation. The pain of her past remained, but it no longer controlled her life. She had learned to balance vulnerability with strength, to acknowledge her fears without being defined by them, and to trust in the support of those who genuinely cared for her well-being. In the quiet of her private chambers, Charlotte reflected on her journey. The scars she carried were no longer just reminders of past suffering. They were symbols of resilience, courage, and survival. And in Thomas, she had found more than a protector. She had found a steadfast ally, someone who had witnessed her growth, respected her boundaries, and offered unwavering support. One evening, as they sat together in the library, Charlotte spoke quietly. "Thomas, I want you to know, you have made a difference in my life, not just by keeping me safe, but by helping me believe in myself again." Thomas nodded, his expression calm but sincere. "It has been an honor to stand by you, Your Highness. Your strength and courage inspire me every day. I will continue to be here quietly as long as you need me." Charlotte smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. For the first time in years, she felt truly in control of her life, empowered by the knowledge that she could face challenges with courage, support, and wisdom. The palace, once a place of isolation and fear, had become a place of growth, resilience, and hope. Together, Charlotte and Thomas continued their journey, navigating the complexities of life with quiet determination and mutual respect. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they served as reminders of the strength, courage, and resilience that had allowed her to reclaim her life, and the presence of a loyal friend who had helped her every step of the way. And so, in the grand halls and quiet gardens of the palace, a story of trust, courage, and healing unfolded. A story that would continue to grow, shaped by resilience, empathy, and the quiet power of human connection.